Coming off his Rookie of the Year campaign in his second year from Japan, Hideo Nomo did what no pitcher before or since has ever done by throwing a no-hitter at the most hitter-friendly park ever created. So let's look at how he got there and what may be the greatest no-hitter ever thrown.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
While Hideo Nomo wasn't the first Japanese player to make it to the majors, as Masanori Murakami made his debut 30 years prior, Nomo was definitely the first star. He came a very long way to get where he would be in 1996, as 8 years prior, he was not selected in the MPB draft, due to control issues. He then joined an industrial league team where he slept with a tennis ball between his fingers to perfect his forkball grip. He would get drafted by the Kentetsu Buffaloes in 1989, making his debut in 1990, where he had an incredible rookie year. He won 18 games, while compiling a 2.91 ERA with a whip of 1.174, throwing 21 complete games in 235 innings. And most impressive was his 287 strikeouts, giving him a K per 9 of 11, good enough to win the pitching Triple Crown, the Sawamura Award, and he won the MVP. So, it was a pretty good rookie year. And looking at his delivery where he turned his back, raised his front leg, then paused for a second, he said this made him throw harder and was very deceiving to hitters, and a windup that gave him the nickname of the Tornado. Nomo would pitch 4 more seasons in MPB, with none being as good as his rookie year. But he still made the All-Star team in all those years, while winning at least 17 games, having an ERA below 4 and a K per 9 at 9.5 or above, as he became one of the most popular players in the league. And he reached outside of Japan, with Ken Griffey Jr. and Randy Johnson saying that he belonged in a Major League uniform when they saw him during a trip to Japan. And after a shortened 1994 season, caused by shoulder issues in part stemming from his new manager, Kaishi Suzuki, who had a pitch until you die philosophy, Nomo had contract disputes with the Buffaloes management. And with ambitions to play in the MLB, he met agent Don Nomura, who shared his ambition. He was looking for someone to challenge the system created in Japanese baseball, and in this, Nomura found a loophole that could get Nomo to the majors. It was the voluntary retirement clause, the only real difference between the Japanese UPC and MLB player contracts, not noticed until Nomura started searching. In MLB, a retired player wanted to come back could only play for his former team unless he was an eligible free agent. In Japan, a retired player wanting to come back was obligated to play for his former team as long as he stayed in Japan, but they were allowed to pursue playing in another country. The US-Japan player contract agreement was enacted in 1966 after the previously mentioned Masanori Murakami belonged to both the Nankei Hawks and the San Francisco Giants, after the Hawks sent him to San Francisco for spring training. The working agreement, as it became known, required both sides to honor their country's baseball contracts and conventions, and the omission to the rule in this contract was understandable for the time. There was still a huge gap between the talent level of MLB and MPB, and players were expected to be loyal to Japan. Sadahara Oh, who played 22 seasons in Japan from 1959 to 1980 and hit 868 home runs, said if he had known about the loophole, he still wouldn't go because feelings were so strong back then, saying that the fans would never forgive him. And after the Buffaloes did not double his $1.5 million salary after the 1994 injury-plagued season, Nomo had already made up his mind that he was going to take a shot in the majors. And this drew tons of criticism from the Japanese public and former players such as Sadahara Oh. He was called a traitor, ignorant, and a troublemaker, as everyone turned on him, including his father, who for a time stopped talking to him. But Nomo didn't waver, saying all the talk was just hot air. And in February of 1995, he signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers, which will go a long way in Japanese players being able to play in the MLB, as the voluntary retirement clause, which became known as the Nomo clause, would be eliminated by NPB. Nomo naturally had an immense amount of pressure on him going into the rookie season, and the Japanese press made their way to each of his starts to be broadcast on Japanese television, though most would take place in the morning. And after just one minor league start, he would make his first major league start on May 2nd, 1995, thanks in part to the season starting late as a result of the player strike in 1994. And Nomo's debut went a long way in bringing back angered fans. He stepped on a major league mound for the first time at Candlestick Park with the Japanese flag waving in the distance, and went on to pitch 5 scoreless innings with 7 strikeouts and 4 walks. A performance that was a sign of things to come, as just like his rookie year in Japan was incredible, his rookie year in the majors amidst the great amount of pressure would also be incredible. After Greg Maddux would injure his groin, Nomo's strong first half would allow him to start the All-Star game, where Maddux said more people wanted to watch him anyway, and many of those who criticized Nomo slowly began to respect him, as his delivery baffled hitters like it did in Japan, as he finished the year with a 2.54 ERA and a 1.056 whip, winning 13 games as he led the league in hits per 9, strikeouts, and K per 9. He ended up finishing 4th in Cy Young voting and 1st in Rookie of the Year voting, finishing ahead of Chipper Jones. He did this with the weight of a country on his back, and Nomo would face huge criticism if he was even average. And in 1995, he was great. And this continued into the next year. He didn't get off to a great start, which kept him from pitching in another All-Star game, but he got better as the season went on. In July and August, 8 of his 10 starts saw him pitch at least 7 innings, with less than 4 earned runs given up. And his first 3 starts in September saw him continue the trend, as in his second start, he was taken out just 1 out before completing his 3rd complete game of the year. And that brings things to September 17th. Nomo would face the Rockies 5 times before this game, and as Vin Scully said, it's a case of where he's pitching. In his 3 starts against the Rockies in Dodger Stadium, he pitched 25 innings, giving up 3 earned runs while striking out 28. But in his 2 starts in Coors Field, he gave up 14 earned runs in 9.2 innings, so obviously a strong contrast. But it's not like he's the only pitcher to pitch worse in Denver. With the elevated sea level, Coors Field is notorious for being the most hitter-friendly park in the game. The Rockies have ranked in the bottom half of the league in team ERA every year except in 2007. And the Rockies play much better at home, having the worst away record in MLB history. The elevation causes curves to curve less and balls to fly farther. And while it is still a problem, it was even worse in the first few years of the existence of Coors Field. Prior to the field's opening in 1993, the record for the most home runs in a season at a ballpark was 248, hit at Wrigley Field in 1961. And it wasn't the one in Chicago. The Angels actually played their inaugural season in the AAA stadium, Wrigley Field, which was in Los Angeles. But after coming close in the short of 1995, 1996 would see 277 home runs hit there. And that would go all the way up to 303 in 1999, as balls were flying on the field and balls were shrinking in the locker room. And in 1996, the Rockies had an incredible lineup regardless of the advantage. They led the NL in home runs and stolen bases, and had 340 home run hitters in Andres Galarraga, Ellis Burks, and Vinny Castilla. So Nomo knew the disadvantages he was at, but he would get an advantage from Mother Nature. A storm hit Coors Field and delayed the game by 2 hours as sprinkles continued at game time. And with 20,000 people leaving before the game started at its new time at 9:05, the temperature dropped with the attendance, and the humidity would cause hard-hit balls to deaden that would normally sail over the fence. Mike Piazza would say, it was a little muggy, and the ball didn't carry as well as it usually does here. Regardless, it would still be a challenge, and with the wet mound, Nomo had to abandon his full lineup and pitch from the stretch, and this caused concern in the first. Nomo gave up a loud-out and a walk to Quentin McCracken, who stole second and advanced to third on a flyout. And with Nomo's control problems, a wild pitch could give the Rockies huge momentum. But Nomo buckled down and got a strikeout. And as the Dodgers took the lead in the second, the first inning set the tone for the night. He would walk batters now and then, but only had a few close calls to end his no-hitter. There was a fielder's choice, a hard line drive to right, and a deep fly to center that would have gone out on almost any other night. But besides that, he was cruising, striking out 7 through the first 8 innings as the Dodgers poured on runs. And after he had that 1-2-3 bottom of the 8th, people from all over the world tuned in to see if Nomo could finish the job. And during Nomo's time in the dugout, where his teammates refused to talk to him as baseball tradition, it was rush hour time in Tokyo, one of the busiest in the world. And things got worse when monitors and busy intersections were showing the game, causing cars to stop in their tracks to watch. And they had to wait a bit as the Dodgers continued to hit, with Nomo forced to go up to the plate, being as the Dodgers nearly went through the lineup. He struck out, not that he really cared, as now he had a chance for history, already at a point where no one had ever been. Vin Scully was on the call as ESPN cut away from an Aaron Judge at bat to show it, and in Japan, Masanori Murakami was on the call as millions watched. He got Delino DeShields to ground out on 3 pitches, then 1 pitch later, he got McCracken to ground out, and he was 1 out away. After falling down 2-1, he would get Ellis Burks to swing and miss on 2 straight pitches, with his last on his signature forkball, to officially make history. Millions cheered in Japan and the US, and even Rockies fans joined in the cheering. Nomo made the courageous move to come to the US, play in the majors, and after a Rookie of the Year campaign, he threw the 242nd in Major League history and the first ever by a Japanese player. And what many people in Japan who are celebrating the accomplishment didn't know is just how impressive this was. Eric Karros would say, Nomo probably doesn't realize how unbelievable this accomplishment is. People in Japan probably don't know Coors Field, but I'm betting it won't be done again. And he was right. Nearly 30 years later, there still has not been a no-hitter thrown at Coors Field. German Marquez and Kyle Freeland brought things to the ninth, but neither could finish things off. And given this, you could argue Nomo had the most impressive no-hitter in history. Statistically, it wasn't even his best start of the year, as he struck out 17 Marlins in a one-run complete game in April, but considering he was pitching on a wet mound in the most hitter-friendly ballpark of all time around his peak, and going against one of the best offensive teams of all time, backed up by the fact that Gary Belleville found them to have the highest composite batting average of any team to have a no-hitter thrown against them. And though he has competitors like Kershaw in 2014, Scherzer in 2015, or any of his hero, Nolan Ryan's 7 no-hitters, given the circumstances, I think this was the best no-hitter ever thrown. And Nomo would throw another no-hitter in 2001 as a member of the Red Sox against the Orioles, once again becoming the first to do so in a park, as this was the first ever at Camden Yards. He also became the fourth to throw a no-hitter in both leagues, and until just a few weeks ago, this was the earliest no-hitter thrown into his season until Ronald Blanco threw a no-hitter on April 1st this year. But what Nomo did, and his performance, went a very long way in the future for Japanese players playing in the MLB. As I talked about in my video about Jackie Robinson in Montreal, he felt that if he didn't perform well, black players might not be given a chance for a long time. That may have been just a part of the massive concerns he was facing at the time, but you can see where he was coming from. And it can also be said for Nomo. If he did not perform well, the massive criticism he was facing would have doubled, and who knows what that would mean for Japanese players in the future. But he was able to handle the pressure, becoming a fan favorite and a hero in the US and Japan, and paved the way for future Japanese stars. 65 players from Japan would go on to play in the majors after him, but arguably, none were as important as Hideo Nomo. And as he threw the only no-hitter ever at Coors Field, as millions watched at home, in offices, or stopped in the middle of rush hour traffic, it was the culmination of the massive risk he took.